What's up, Buck Doug with D&E in the Garage. Today let's talk about some more Jeep history, my personal favorite topic. Now, we've talked about all kinds of icon Jeep models on this channel at various times, ones that people know tons of stuff about, the military Jeeps that started it all, the CJ lines, the Wrangler lines, but there's a line of Jeeps that is as iconic, if not more iconic and more important to the brand than any of those, and it's a long-lasting line, and it turns out Jeepers know next to nothing about it. They know almost nothing about this particular line's actual origin, history, and true family tree. I'm talking, of course, about the Jeep Cherokee. Today, we're going to set the record straight on the history of the beloved, the iconic Jeep Cherokee. Now, where the Jeep Cherokee nameplate originates is the first place that people know very little about. People seem to think that the Cherokee started with the XJ. That's not true. The 1984 XJ is the second generation Cherokee. The first generation Cherokee started in 1974. It was based on the SJ Wagoneer platform. It was a two-door version of the Wagoneer. The whole purpose in 1974 of releasing the full-frame truck SJ Cherokee was to allow the Wagoneer to move upmarket. They wanted to come up with a sportier, possibly less expensive, a little more rugged version of the Wagoneer so that they could move the Wagoneer upmarket, make it a little bit more luxurious, really dig into that family demographic. Now, this is a little bit confusing because from 63 to 67, there was a two-door Wagoneer, and it was just called a Wagoneer, just had two doors. The difference between a two-door Wagoneer and an SJ Cherokee is the C-pillar. On the two-door Wagoneer, the C-pillar is the same it is on a four-door Wagoneer. On a two-door SJ Cherokee, the C-pillar doesn't exist. What they did was they removed the Wagoneer C-pillar, they gave the Cherokee a thicker, larger D-pillar, and it gave the SJ Cherokee in 1974 this really iconic greenhouse in the back. This long fixed window, you could get it as a sliding window in some models, and it makes for an incredibly iconic truck. These things are painfully good looking, man. People always talk about the old Broncos, Blazers, Ram Chargers, right? Those three get compared, they get talked about. The Cherokee belongs in this group. I don't know how more people don't know that the Cherokee even existed, right? It's an absolute icon of 1970s truck and off-road culture, and AMC absolutely hit the friggin' nail on the head with the SJ Cherokee in 1974. The interesting thing about the 1974 SJ Cherokee is that in the literature, in its marketing literature, is the very first time the term SUV is ever used, Sport Utility Vehicle, which, in my opinion, ends the argument on what is the first SUV. It's the SJ Cherokee. It literally invented the term, and then the Cherokee from then on just continued to perfect it. So in 74, they release this two-door, kind of basic, ruggedy version. In 75, they release a wide track version. Now, the wide track version is 3 inches wider. It includes fender flares. You get a Dana 44 front and rear. You also get larger stock tires and larger wheel cutouts. What they're doing with the wide track is making a dedicated off-road version. Now, you can get the standard narrow body SJ Cherokee, which is still plenty capable. That's going to be more of just a round town grocery getter, maybe occasional off-road use. If you get the wide track, though, you are getting a really strong, really capable vehicle. In 1974, they kind of confusingly add a four-door option to the lineup. Let me explain this, though. By 74, the Wagoneer is firmly moved up market, and the SJ Cherokee is selling like crazy. So what they do is they bring in a four-door version so that now you can have a slightly less expensive Wagoneer. Maybe you want a more capable Wrangler Wagoneer, but you still need to be able to bring the family around. And in fact, the standard track, the wide track, the two-door, and the four-door all sell like crazy. It's an incredibly popular vehicle. You had 4 engine options. You could get it with with the 4.2 liter AMC straight 6. You could get the 360 AMC 5.9. Now, that's not to be confused with the Mopar 5.9s that Grand Cherokees would get later. This is the AMC 5.9, and you can get that with a 2-barrel or a 4-barrel carb. And then on top of that, you could get a massive 401 6.6 liter V8. It's the largest engine ever put in a Jeep, including the 6.4 liter supercharged SRT8 that they put in the Grand Cherokee. The largest engine that has ever been put in a Jeep went in the Wagoneer and the Cherokee in the late 70s, the 401 there. Another interesting first for the SJ Cherokee was the first vehicle to ever get permanent all-wheel drive in the form of Quadra-Track. It's that 249 transfer case that you see in later years. I think they also used a 229, but they both are Quadra-Track. It's permanent all-wheel drive, viscous coupler in the center there. I couldn't find anything to back this up, but I found an article from the time that said the SJ Cherokee was throwing people off that were trying to review it because it couldn't be dynoed. I guess people didn't have all-wheel drive dynos at the time. I couldn't find enough information about dynos in the 70s, but somebody who was working on cars back then let me know. What I heard about the Cherokee was that people were thrown off because they couldn't dyno it because you couldn't stop the front wheels from turning, so they obviously couldn't put it on a dyno, but I can't confirm that. I wasn't able to find it. If you got a manual, you got the Dana 20 transfer case, which we all know from old Jeeps is an incredibly popular, incredibly capable transfer case. Another interesting thing to consider is in 1979, the SJ Cherokee went from round headlights to square headlights. This is going to come in later. All you people that hate the square headlights on the XJ can thank the SJ for that. Now, I don't know why the SJ Cherokee gets so little love, why it's so well forgotten. In fact, I didn't even know about it until a number of years into really being into Jeeps. Like, you kind of have to go looking for it. I don't know that I've really ever seen one in person. I would love to. I'd love to get my hands on one of the old two-door ones. They are just incredibly cool, incredibly capable. Back during the days when American automakers made their vehicles body on frame, big, heavy, Detroit steel, big displacement engines. An interesting thing though about the 401, the 6.6 liter, a 6.6 liter in 1979 made the same horsepower that a 3.7 liter PowerTech made in 2005. About 210 horsepower. Now, obviously, the torque is going to be drastically different, but and I'm a huge fan of displacement, man. I love big displacement numbers, but clearly we can do today with half the displacement what it took them all that displacement to do back then. Now, the SJ Cherokee was cool, but as we know, the most driving force in the 70s and 80s in automotive culture was the gas crisis. The gas crisis is the single most influential event in automotive history in the second half of the 1900s. It influenced so much, it made or destroyed brands, and it destroyed the legacy of the SJ Cherokee. All right, when the gas shortage came in, SJ Cherokee, full-frame Cherokees with 6.6 liter V8s were going out of style, and in response, AMC knew they needed to design something smaller. The XJ Cherokee, the second-gen Cherokee from 1984 to 2001, was in fact a direct response to the gas crisis. They knew they needed a small, more efficient little SUV, and that's where the Cherokee comes from. I don't think we think of the XJ Cherokee in those terms today, but in 1984, when it began design in 1979, that was what it was being aimed towards. And if you look at the other SUVs being designed at the time, compare it to any other late 70s, early 80s SUV. Blazers, Broncos, you know what I mean? Even the Japanese ones were not as small and efficient as the XJ Cherokee. So like I said, beginning design in 1979, the XJ Cherokee project was given $250 million for development. At the end of the day, it came out 31 inches shorter, 6 inches narrower, 4 inches lower, and a full 1,200 pounds lighter than its original older brother, the SJ Cherokee. Original clay models of the XJ had it looking very similar to the SJ, which is why I mentioned the square headlights that the SJ got in 1979. The XJ having square headlights is likely a result of the SJ having square headlights. It's entirely plausible, I'm not going to say possible or definite, but plausible that the Cherokee, XJ Cherokee, might have gotten round headlights had the SJ Cherokee kept them. Now, an interesting thing keeps happening here. When I was talking about the SJ, I would say the SJ, and now that I'm talking about the XJ, I just keep saying Cherokee, because if you say Jeep Cherokee, nobody on the planet assumes you're talking about any other generation than the XJ. There are in fact 5 generations of the Cherokee. We're going to get to that later. It's just an interesting way to illustrate how important the XJ is to the Jeep brand, to the Cherokee nameplate, and possibly automotive history in general. There are a lot of firsts and a lot of things that the XJ did. I'm just going to say it, man. It made today's SUVs what they are. The SJ may very well have been the first SUV to use that name. The XJ was the first SUV to be an SUV as we know it today. Point blank. SUVs before this were trucks. The SJ was a truck, happened to be closed in. Ram Chargers, Broncos, Blazers, trucks. The Cherokee XJ is an SUV. Now, development starts in 1979. An interesting thing that you need to know about AMC in 1979 is that they're venturing into this partnership with Renault, the French automaker. I've talked about this partnership many times. What Renault did was they gave AMC $150 million to get them out of a hole, to help them develop new vehicles. And in return, obviously, Renault would get a portion of the company. Now, they were designing the XJ in secret. They didn't want the outside world to know what they were doing. They didn't even let Renault in on the secret, which was not okay with Renault, because essentially they'd given them a bunch of money and weren't allowed to know how they were spending it. So they sent one of their execs over to check on production. A man by the name of Francois Castain became part of the Cherokee planning process, and he is the man who is responsible for what I consider one of the worst motors ever put in a Jeep. Some of you have argued with me on that point. I don't really care. The 2.8 liter V6, the teeny tiny little V6 that they put inside the Cherokee in the first 2 years of production. He's the one that wanted to use that grossly underpowered V6. He wanted to make this vehicle insanely efficient, and he wanted to shock people. Oh my goodness, that vehicle can do all that with such a small motor. Problem was, it couldn't actually do all that, and it was a terrible motor. And as we've discussed later, he is also, or that motor is also why the Cherokee gets heat soak issues when they didn't have enough room to properly put the 4 liter in it. So Francois Castain is the reason you have heat soak, basically. Screw that French guy. So like I was saying, 1984, the XJ is released with the 2.5 liter AMC straight 4. That's actually a very good motor. They put those in Wranglers and other vehicles as well. They are last an incredibly long time. And then the 2.8, for the entire length of the Cherokee's life, it was available in both 2-door and 4-door. An interesting side note to the XJ Cherokee is that from 84 to 90, they released a Wagoneer, a Jeep Wagoneer on the XJ platform. What this was essentially was it was just an XJ that had a different grille and different badging. The Limited came with wood trim, and what it was an upscale version of the XJ. It's confusing though, because it was sold at the same time as the Grand Wagoneer, the full-frame SJ Grand Wagoneer. AMC and Jeep in general have this long history of being very confusing with their names and not really having it make sense. The Wagoneer sold well, from what I can tell, various different versions of it, but for whatever reason it went away in 1990. In 1985, they decided to offer a 2-wheel drive version to cater to fleet markets, to also cater to people who didn't necessarily need the 4-wheel drive version. And even though I've espoused on this channel many times that I don't think any Jeep should ever be 2-wheel drive XJs sold very well in more tempered climates that didn't have snow. In city areas, they used them as mail Jeeps in some areas. So I get it. By the late 80s, AMC was already planning the replacement for the Cherokee. The 1993 Jeep Grand Cherokee ZJ was supposed to be the replacement for the Cherokee. It was not supposed to live past the early 90s, but sales stayed high, so now Chrysler, the owner of Jeep, decided to keep on both vehicles. And this is another illustration of Jeep confusing name lines. They were going to do Cherokee and then replace it with the Grand Cherokee, but instead the Cherokee and the Grand Cherokee exist at the same time, and they have nothing to do with each other. It's not like the Grand Cherokee's a bigger or more luxurious version of the Cherokee. They have like no components similar outside of some driveline components. Very confusing. If they were going to keep the Cherokee, they should have named the Grand Cherokee something else, but whatever. The Cherokee remains relatively unchanged until 1997 when it gets a facelift. This included a steel liftgate where previously it had been fiberglass, a restyled header panel and tail lights, stiffer unibody, though they did this somehow by using thinner sheet metal, which reduced the toe cap of the late model XJs. I'm not really sure how they accomplished that. Reworked gauge cluster, reworked wiring harness, which actually caused havoc in 97. They say do not own a 1997 Cherokee. They changed up the whole wiring harness to make it better, and it took them the full production year of 1997 to get it right. So 97 Cherokees are plagued with very, very, very strange wiring issues, just absolute ghosts in the machine, angry pixies doing angry things all over the angry place. In 1999 and 1/2, they updated the intake manifold to make up for new emission standards. This is another incredibly aggravating thing that Jeep does. Why change something in the middle of a production year? Stop doing that, automakers. Stop doing that. And you know what? I hate to admit it, but I mostly only see this on American automakers. Ford, I know, does this. Jeep definitely does it. Oh, we're halfway through the year. Let's change the friggin' intake. This will be real amusing to people trying to work on this thing in 20 years. God damn ridiculous. For the 2000 and 2001 model years, they got distributor-less coil-on plug ignition systems. Some people don't like them. I have had literally more 4 liters with that system than I can count, and I've never had an issue. I actually like it quite a bit, with the exception of if one coil goes, you have to replace the whole thing, but that's only happened to me once. So I don't know, people don't like it. You also got larger U-joints in the front. I believe that's from 96, not just 97. You got larger U-joints, so a common upgrade is to upgrade to axle shafts from a 96 Jeep and up. Additionally, from 96 and up, actually, and here's another one, I think it's 96 and a half, the 8 1/4 that were going in the rears of XJs got a 29 spline 8 1/4 as opposed to a 27 spline 8 1/4. It makes it stronger, and if you have anything from 97 and up, it's definitely 29. My understanding is that some 96s got 27, some 96s got 29. Thank you, Jeep. The XJ went through its life with a number of engines. That's going to be the 2.5 liter straight 4 for the entire life. It had the 2.8 liter V6 from GM from 84 to 86, the Renault 2.1 liter 4-cylinder diesel from 85 to 94, and then a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder diesel from 94 to 01, and then of course various iterations of the famous or infamous, depending on who you talk to, AMC 4.0 i6. That included the Renix and then later Chrysler fuel injected 4 liter. In my opinion, that is the engine that made the XJ, but that's just one man's opinion who's very, very loyal to the 4 liter. Transmissions, you got 7 different manual transmissions, 3 different automatic transmissions. Another interesting thing about the XJ, you could get standard transmission or an automatic transmission every year of its manufacturing. They didn't ever take out the manual, which I personally think is really cool. For 4x4 systems, command track was standard on all Cherokees. That's going to be from 84 to 87 an NP207 transfer case, and 87 to 01 an NP231 transfer case, another iconic piece of Cherokees. And then select track was optional on many Cherokees. From 84 to 86, that's going to be your NP228 or NP229 vacuum actuated transfer case. And then from 87 to 01, your MP242, which was made more popular in the Grand Cherokees. The obvious addition of Select Track is that it adds full-time 4-wheel drive, which is, in my opinion, better for a daily driver, though people argue that the Command Track transfer cases are stronger because they're simpler. For axles in the front, you always got a Dana 30. From 84 to 99, that was a high pinion. From 2000 to 2001, they switched to the low pinion. I don't really know why they switched to the low pinion. High pinions are better in literally every way, but they did. It's the low pinion from the TJ. In the rear, you got a number of different axles. You got the Dana 35. From 84 to 89, it had no C-clips. From 90 to 96, it did have C-clips. From 97 to 01, it did have C-clips, and you only got it on XJs that had ABS. Then you got the highly coveted Dana 44. From 87 to 91, it was a 30 spline, and it only came on non-ABS toe pack package models. People have debated exactly where the 44 comes from. To my best knowledge, and after literal years of research and trying to nail this down, this is what I've come up with. 87 to 91 tow package XJs that did not have ABS. You're gonna argue with me, I know. That's the best I can do. Let's all agree it didn't come on many and it should have come on more. That's the best we can say. And then a largely underappreciated axle that also came in the XJ, the Chrysler 8 1/4. From 91 to 96, it had no C-clips. From 96 to 01, it did have C-clips. From 91 to 96, as mentioned, 27 spline. From 96 to 01, 29 spline. This always came with C-clips, and it always came on Jeeps without ABS. Now, another interesting bit of the Cherokee that I wasn't going to include because it seemed irrelevant, but then I saw the variation. The number of gear ratios that this was offered with from the factory is insane, so I figured it was worth going through the list. I'm gonna have to literally read it because I couldn't memorize it. You could get 307 gears. This only came with a manual transmission behind the 4-liter. You could get 354s, which I did not know, with an automatic transmission behind the straight 6, but only if you had the Dana 44, so that's going to be your tow package. You could also get 344s with a manual transfer case behind the straight 6 if you got a Dana 35. You got 355s with an automatic transmission behind the straight 6. This is probably the most common setup. That's what both my Cherokees had. You could get 373s with an automatic transmission behind the straight 6 if you got the tow package or the upcountry package, or you had the 2.5-liter VM diesel. You could get 310s if you had the 4-cylinder, the 2.5. Now this is good to know because 410s are awesome. So if you ever see a 4-cylinder Cherokee in the junkyard, it likely has 410s. Pull them, put it in your 4-liter, and you've got some really nice gears there. And then this one blew me away. You could get 456 gearing at some point over the life of the Cherokee with a tow package, with the 4-cylinder, with the automatic transmission. It kind of just seems like the 4-cylinder shouldn't be allowed to have the tow package, but if it did, you got 456 gearing and you were winding it out at $4 grand at like 50 miles an hour, I assume. But that's crazy. Could you imagine in the junkyard, you find a Dana 30 and what I imagine would have had to have been an 8 1/4 from a 4-cylinder tow package with stock 456 gearing? That would be the absolute gold mine, the mother load. Now they also made some special features for the XJ that you could only get for government contracts. They wanted to cater these to government vehicles. We're talking law enforcement, we are talking military use, and we're talking USPS mail delivery. Some of the options you could get. Now here's the thing, unlike Ford, who makes a police version, and Dodge makes a police version, they didn't make a police version of the XJ. They just made all these extra options that you could get, so the police departments would say, okay, we need this, this, and this for our police XJs. Here are some of the options. I think at least some of the options available for government contracts. You get 10-inch rear drum brakes instead of 9-inch. You could get improved cooling systems, including a trans cooler. You could get the high idle switch, which would click your idle up to 2,500 RPMs. You could get the HD suspension. You could get the Dana 44 rear with or without limited slip. You could get the no interior, so I guess that'd be law enforcement, where it's just bare bones interior and some kind of cage in the back. I don't really know what. And then, of course, an upgraded alternator. For USPS, they offered it in right-hand drive in the United States, which is rare. Someone tried to tell me that anybody could buy a right-hand drive vehicle. You didn't have to be a mail carrier. When I put out that mail video, there's no way that's true. There's no way I could just go and buy a right-hand drive Wrangler and drive it around. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Now, during the production of the XJ, there were 13 different trim levels available. I'm gonna bring up just 3 of the more notable ones. The first is the Laredo. This was basically an appearance package. You got, it was available from 1985 to 1992. You got chrome accents, the plaid interior, which I think is just awesome. They call it the luggage fabric. 5-spoke alloy wheels, which was rare for the early 90s. AM, FM radio with 4 speakers, and optional 6 Jensen AccuSound speakers, again for the early 90s. This is very interesting. The infrared single button remote keyless entry, once again early 90s, really cool stuff. The overhead console, which is really cool. Dual power seats, again, think 1985, that's crazy. Air conditioning standard, and this eventually was replaced by the Country model in 1993. And another very interesting model was was the Orvis, which was available from 1999 to 2000. It was only available in the United Kingdom, which is a bummer. It got specially labeled floor mats, 16-inch Icon alloy wheels with two-tone color scheme, false hood vents, tailgate spoiler with integrated LED brake light, ruffled leather seats, which are allegedly incredibly comfortable, with 6-way electric adjustments, leather door panels, leather spare tire cover, Orvis logo embossed on each headrest, golden Orvis logo on top of the ashtray lid, and standard heated seats and mirrors. It sounds like an absolutely decked out version. I don't understand fully why it only got released in the UK and not here, but that, I guess, whatever. Another interesting thing about the Cherokee, this has always made me wonder, there weren't very many off-road specific packages. I understand in the beginning they didn't think necessarily that the XJ was going to take off as an off-road Jeep icon like it did, but once you're into the 90s and it's apparent that people are using these things out in friggin' Moab and whatnot, why not make some off-road packages? The only off-road package that they made was the Upcountry package. That included a 1-inch lift, skid plates in the front and rear, tow hooks in the front and rear, upgraded shocks, no rear sway bar at all, limited slip rear differential, heavy duty radiator, an external transmission cooler, a full-size spare, and I imagine just a bucket of smiles. I don't understand why there weren't more off-road packages a la the Overland that they do today. If they had marketed more, I don't know. I don't understand why more people didn't buy the Upcountry package. Maybe it was crazy expensive. It's so hard being into 20-year-old vehicles because, like, we know today what people are using them for. Like, I would kill to get my hands on a Cherokee, like an Upcountry Cherokee or an Overland Grand Cherokee from the factory, but I was a kid. I couldn't do that. It makes me wonder, like, what vehicles could we buy today that in 20 years people are going to be like, oh my god, I wish I had that, you know? The only one I can think of today, maybe that Chevy Colorado, the new ZR2. Like, maybe in 20 years, people who are really into Colorados are going to be like, why weren't there more ZR2 packages made? I don't know, man. I wish there were more Cherokees that came with the Upcountry. Though now that I'm saying it, I just thought about another possibility. There probably were more. They just are all completely destroyed from jackwagons like me beating the hell out of them for a number of years. Anyway, back to the story. The XJ actually has a very interesting overseas history as well. It's the first ever joint venture between an American and Chinese automaker. The Cherokee is the first American vehicle to ever be made in China. Now, that's not a fact that I'm particularly proud of because you can imagine, but kind of cool, I guess. It's interesting. Another interesting thing, the XJ Cherokee was produced in China until 2014. 2014, they kept making the XJ Cherokee, well, their version of the XJ Cherokee. The XJ Cherokee in China looks a little different. The headlights are different. The interior is a little different. I'm not even going to go through the different engines. They're all over the map. Nothing like what we have here. But I find that incredibly interesting. Additionally, overseas in Europe, they made a van version of the XJ. They did this to get around some kind of tax, I don't know what. They were able to get it in as a utility vehicle instead of a passenger vehicle, or you know how that kind of thing goes. But essentially, instead of having glass in the back windows, it has these metal sheets that I guess they call it a van, which is fun. The XJ was killed off by the villain name having Wolfgang Bernhard. He was a cost analysis specialist for Daimler during the Daimler-Chrysler merger. Wolfgang came in and decided that the Cherokee needed to go. So if you want someone to hate, don't blame the 2002 Liberty, don't blame Chrysler, don't blame anybody else, blame Wolfgang. Of course it was a German. They ruin everything. So at this point that I want to note one thing about this video as we move forward. This video, you guys did request it, and when you requested that I do this video, I was already working on it. There's a tremendous amount of research and fact checking because I knew stuff about Cherokees, but I had to make sure. This video was actually a response to the Donut Media video about the Cherokee that they put out a few months ago. I love Donut Media. I truly, truly do. But the history they put out on the Cherokee was so outlandishly bad. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. It made me furious. They didn't include all the vehicles, and they made the Grand Cherokee and Cherokee on the same line. So Donut Media, if by some strange twist you happen to see my video and made it however many minutes in, Nolan, you seem cool as hell. Pumphrey, I'm pretty sure you'd annoy the hell out of me in real life, but you are cool as hell. I love watching your stuff. You should have me on though if you ever want to do Jeep histories again, because you guys absolutely butchered it. So I'm thinking at this point there is more Cherokee history to come, a lot more, a full video left. I'm going to split this into 2 parts, all right? We did the SJ and the XJ today. This was the fun part. The next part is a little murkier, so stay tuned. I'm going to try to put the videos up same day or a couple days apart. If you have any comments, I'd love to know what you think about the XJ and the SJ. I'd love to know if you even knew about the SJ, all right? And tell me which of these two you would, if you could pick one of these from the factory, what would it be and in what configuration? All right, I'm going to sign off for now. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time.